Good evening and welcome to the Exiles Memorial Center. My name is Inês Brandão. I am the coordinator of the Exiles Memorial Center. And tonight we meet with Joan Arnay Halperin, in order to talk with her about her family's escape from Belgium in 1940. As we begin, a reminder that this conversation will be held in English only. Joan is in the United States, so it's the afternoon there. Before we continue, I would like to acknowledge the support and help of the team at the Exiles Memorial Center, the work of the Dom Luís Foundation, and all of the different divisions at the Cascais City Council that have helped us prepare this event. The Sousa Mendes Foundation and Olivia Mattis in particular, who has helped us with making many of the contacts and uncover much of the information that we share. And of course, Joan herself and her family for sharing her time and her family archives with us tonight. For those of us who don't know us, the Exiles Memorial Center is located in the municipality of Cascais. We are a museum that explores and interprets the stories of the refugees who came through Portugal, and in particular Cascais, in 1940, in the 1930s and the 1940s, as they escaped persecution throughout Europe. We are located here in the first floor of what was at the time and still today the Estoril Post Office building. We are a municipal structure overseen by Cascais City Council, and our programming is overseen by the Dom Luís Foundation. A little word about Cascais. Cascais is the municipality where Estoril is located. For those of you who have memories or personal memories that relate to this period, the name Estoril will most likely be resonant rather than Cascais. But at the time and today, Estoril was actually a territory within the Cascais municipality. It is a half an hour train ride away from Lisbon, and so it was at the time. And so during the 1930s and 1940s, because of the tourist-oriented infrastructure that it held, it welcomed thousands of people, thousands of non-Portuguese nationals who stayed in its hotels. Today, we will look at a different type of map, the map of the exodus of the Krakowiak family, who left initially from Belgium in 1914, May 1940, after the invasion, and then made their way south into Figueira da Foz with occasional day trips, including to Cascais. The group we will be discussing was composed by Hala, Ignace, and their daughter Yvonne, Julia, the mother of Ignace, and Hipek, the brother and sister-in-law of Ignace. And to tell us more about the Krakowiak family and where it came from, how it ended up in Brussels, and then the remaining of the exodus, we have with us today Joan Arnay Halperin. And Joan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. And let's start at the beginning. That is not so early. We only have an hour. Would you tell us a little bit more about where your parents came from, the origins of your father's family, and then your mother's family?
Thank you, Inês, for having me here today to tell my parents' story of how they escaped from Belgium and ended up eventually in the United States. Everything I'm going to tell you is from the interview that I did with my mother in 1989, on January the 1st of 1989, when we sat together and my brother was at the video camera and I was the interviewer. And the albums, the pictures, of course, are from her albums. This is my father's family, the Krakowiak family of Warsaw. You can see they were a nicely established family. And one day when I was giving this talk at a temple youth group, the rabbi said to me, you know, that's Passover and they're not wearing anything on their heads. No religious head covering. And I said, that was the first time I discovered it. I said, yes, they were quite an assimilated family. So you have in the very front here on the left, that's my father's brother Hipek. Then to the left of Hipek is my father. And the woman sitting to the right of, I guess the left of my father is his grandmother, who was Sarah Tenenbaum. The little girl over there is Paulina Krakowiak, and she was the last child of Julia, who you see sitting next between the two women. That's Julia Krakowiak, my mother's father. And then to her left is Abraham Krakowiak, the patron of this family. And to his left is Janka, married to Heniek, who was the oldest brother. And then next to Heniek was Kazik, who was very close to my father in age. And then next to Kazik is Jezik, who was a 1 year older than Paulina. So Julia had 7 children in a very short time, which was quite common in that time period. Okay, here are the brothers grown up. So you can see now, I don't know if I need to go through their names again, but this man who was sitting next to Abraham in the center on Abraham's right became Henry. And the man above him became Paul. And the man to his left became Robert, my father. And the man to my father's left became Joseph, excuse me, Joseph. And then the man to his left became George. And the man sitting next to Abraham became James. Okay. This is my mother's family, the Kaplan family. And here you see them at a spa in 1939. And I have another picture from that period. Can you see it here? This is the 3 people who are on the right in an individual photo. And it says here, this is the only way I know the date. It says 24th of July in 1939. So that's how I know when that picture was taken. Later on, we'll learn all of their names, okay? But I just want to say something. Oh, can we go back? Do you see the gentleman, the one on the right with that very tall lady? Yeah. His name was Max Gorelik. He was a football player, and he married my mother's sister. I think I should name them, really. To the left, we have Solomon, and he was married to the lady in the striped sweater right over there with the boy in front of her. She's Renia, and his name is Marcish. And then, next to Salo is my grandmother Celia, and next to Celia, her husband David. And then I mentioned already Renia, and we have Lily. She was the youngest. She was 8 years younger than oh yeah, Fredja, and Fredja's on the end. So we have Max and Fredja. Okay. Here's my father with his 1929 Opel. I don't know exactly the date of that picture, but you see, he left Poland, as did his brothers. The 5 older brothers left Poland. They were living in Belgium, France, and one migrated to Argentina. The only child left in Poland during the war was the youngest boy, who was Jezik, who became George. Okay, so here's my father, and this is the way he appeared in 1935 in May when he went to have a blind date with my mother. He was 33 years old at the time, and his mother said, Ignacio, it's time to get married. So he came home for Passover. He was introduced to my mother on a blind date. and they met. And after 3 weeks, he said to her, "I love you, Hala, and I will not leave Poland without you." And my mother was quite shocked. It was sudden, but she was 24 years old. Her older sister, her two sisters were married already. 24 was quite an old lady at the time. And she had already been to Belgium for 1 year of studying French. She knew French, and so she said yes. And here they are. Next picture, on their honeymoon. Also, in September of 1935, they were married in August, 4 months after he came back to Poland, and they left by the arranging papers and things like that. They left in September, and as they were driving from Poland to Belgium, where my father had been for 16 years and working and living for 16 years, the Nuremberg laws were put into effect. So as of that day, in the Nuremberg laws, the Jews were no longer citizens of Germany. I don't know how that affected my parents. Next, please. I should know how that affected my parents, because this is a picture that was taken in the winter of 36, 37, right in front of the German Olympic venue, the winter venue for the German Olympics. You see, they're standing under flags of swastikas, and they're standing in front of the venue there, the Olympic venue. When my mother left Poland, her mother promised that she would come to visit, and so she did. Here she is in Brussels in 1936, September. That's Celia visiting my mom and my dad, who are my dad's on the left, and my mother. And the little boy you see there is Oscar. Oscar was born in 28 in Brussels, and the lady to Jane, who married Henry. You saw them earlier. Now, you saw the photo of my father's brothers, correct? And Henrik, the oldest, was the intellectual, my mother told me, of the family. And he had read Mein Kampf, and he said, "I believe what he says. Hitler wants to destroy the Jewish people." So in 1939, he left Belgium for the United States. He took his family and they went to the World's Fair. So they were, as tourists, they were able to leave the United States. They went to the World's Fair, and he sold my father his Mercedes-Benz. So here you see them in a very strong Mercedes-Benz. Next. Later that year, you see my mother holding my sister Yvonne. Yvonne was born in June of 38, and here she is at about 1 year, or almost 1 year old, on the beach in Knokke, Le Zout, the holiday resort on the coast that they loved to go to. Everybody loved the coast, and everybody, not everybody, but people who could went to the coast. And here you see them on a holiday in May of 39. This is the lighter building on the right is the address at Cherise, Avenue de Cherise, which Inês found on the internet, because she's very good that way at finding things. And I had never seen this building before. And this is the apartment building where they lived in Brussels. But it was a short stay. It was 5 years. My father had lived in Brussels before. I told you he went there in about 1926. But together they lived in this apartment.
For those of you who are familiar with Belgium, this is Avenue des Cerisiers. It's in Schaerbeek. And you can see that at the time they moved into one of these apartments, we're not really sure which one. This was a new building at the time. So they had moved into quite a nice boulevard, very light, very airy, and into a very recent construction.
And so in March of 1940, after the invasion of Poland, which was in September of 1939, Jews and people in Belgium started to become very worried. Would Hitler go west? So thousands and thousands of people went to the coast. My parents rented an apartment early that year, and so they were there in March of 1940. And Julia is still there, because Julia came to Belgium every summer because she had 3 sons living in Belgium. And in the summer of 1939, Jezik, her son, the youngest one who was still in Warsaw, wrote to her, "Mamusha, don't come back. Things are we're very anxious here. Don't come back." And she didn't go back, and that saved her life.
So what made you decide to leave Belgium?
The Germans were on our back. We couldn't, they were taking over. In 3 days they took over Poland, and they were all at the Belgian borders. And so we had to go. We had to run. We didn't think we were going to stay long. We thought we'd go back, you know.
And what was your route?
Oh, we went to France because that was summer, and we had a summer, we rented an apartment for the summer, you know, in near the French border. So from there, we started to go and go and go, and the Germans were following. We saw the bombs, we saw the planes, and there was no more gas. People were breaking the pumps to get the gas. And
so every night when you stopped,
we slept in the car, we slept in the woods.
That was the 1989 interview that I did with my mother. And I want you to know that until this month, I have not shown these videos that you're going to see publicly, because I was wondering how my mother would feel about it. But now that I've been a part of the Sousa Mendes Foundation and doing education with students, I realize that this testimony from 1989, which is 30-something years ago, is very important. So I'm showing it to you and to students. So this is what it looked like in Bordeaux. It was maybe this picture isn't as bad as it was. It was crowded. Okay, and we have another excerpt from my mother's video now.
And then we had to move again. So when we arrived to a bigger city like Bordeaux, where there was a consulate, and because we saw there's no use to stay here and every day clean another house and sleep in another house. And
you couldn't stay in France?
No. They were moving too fast, the Germans, and so he went to that Bordeaux where there was a consulate, and there was a lot of people there banging at the doors, and everybody wanted to get in. He was at the door, and when he had a chance, when there was nobody there, like for a minute or what, so he went in, and he asked them to stamp the passports, you know.
I'd just like to say at this point that there's a little story you might like. The story is this, that my father pushed himself to the front of the line, and he pretended like he was part of the people who were organizing over there, and he said, "People, get in line, because if we don't get in line, nobody's going to get in." He put himself at the front of the line, and then he went in. So that was the kind of guy he was. Okay, next, please. And here is Aristides de Sousa Mendes. I don't need to tell you too much about him and the courageous act of heroism that he did to save thousands and thousands of lives. I think that Portuguese people know about him. And Inês, do I need to say more about that?
No, I would just like to ask if you have an idea of when your family received their visas.
You know, Inês, we cannot find my family's number in the book. We have one book. I think Olivia will correct me later on. We have one book, and there may be another book, but we have not been able to lay our hands on it. It may be that they're in the second book, but I think it was sometime around early June. You know, they met a lot of people. Well, we'll talk about them in Portugal, all the people they met. So I don't have a date.
Another question that I think people would be curious by now pertains to, in her testimony, your mother alluded to it a little bit, this idea of cleaning houses, i.e. cleaning other people's spaces so that they could sleep there. How did they get by in France with thousands of people escaping? How did they get by in terms of food, shelter, petrol, for example?
I know that around Dunkirk, there was an incident on the road. The British soldiers were retreating, going north. The refugees were running south. My Aunt Sophie, Zosha, the one that you will meet later on in the pictures, I guess, she told me, one of the troopers' cars knocked our car off the road, and then they had to pull us back on the road. And so the lieutenant or the commander of this vehicle gave my father petrol in a jerry can, gave him petrol. And so maybe that helped him to get a little bit further. But my mother told me they were breaking the pumps were empty. Now, my aunt says when we left Dunkirk, she said, I could see the flames. She said, I looked out the back window and I could see the flames. Dunkirk was burning. So you have an idea about what time in history that they were there. On the road, when she talks about cleaning another house, she meant barns, evacuated houses where they slept for the night. And at a certain point in their trip, they had to cover their car with hay because the French authorities were confiscating people's cars. So they covered the car with hay to make it look like a haystack. When they arrived in the board, people along the way fed them and helped them. And I think the Red Cross also was instrumental in giving food to people on the route. They followed the smallest roads that they could. They weren't on big routes, that I know. And when they arrived in the Bordéus region, my father went to work at a vineyard to get eggs, milk, cheese, bread. That's one thing my mother told me. I know from her testimony.
Visa to where?
To Portugal.
So from France, you went through Spain to Portugal?
Yes, because we knew that in Spain there was poverty and there was no place for us to stay. And Portugal, that was the last stop. We couldn't go any further because that was already...
So what was the name of the town that you went to in Portugal?
Portugal, well, the first town that we could stop was Figueira da Foz.
And this is the house that had many apartments that they lived in. Number 10. Is it Sotomayor, Santa Mayor? Help me, Inês. Sotomayor, it says Sotomayor.
It's actually, the street has a longer name, is Rua Joaquim Sotomayor. But for some reason, at the time, Rua Sotomayor was enough to identify the street.
And that's where the correspondence we'll see later came to this street. So that's how I know that this was the building where they lived. When I was there in 2007, I've been to Portugal 2013, 2016, 17, 18, but in 2016, I was in front of this building and took a picture with very important people who I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes. So let's see what my mother says about her reception in Portugal.
The people in Portugal were the best in the whole world. They were so compassionate. They asked us to come in and feed us and sleep over and until you know where you're going and rest and take a shower or take a bath. Strange people, they were coming out with food.
Yes. So this is Figueira da Foz in front of the Café Europa, which I am not sure is still working. When I was there lately, it was closed. And this is where refugees went in the afternoons to find out where they could go. People were leaving. They got visas to South America. They got visas to Central America. They got all kinds of visas, but my parents couldn't find anyone to give them an affidavit. They wanted to go to the United States. They wanted to reconnect with their Henyek, Yanka, Oscar, and their mother, who was also on their way on the other side of the ocean, and everybody wanted to connect in the US. My parents stayed in Portugal for 18 months. Oh, let's go to the next photo, please. So my mother was talking about the reception they received in Figueira da Foz. Here she's in the casino of Figueira da Foz. She told me there was no gambling, but there was music. And I don't know if she said there were shows, but they opened the casino to give people a little bit of diversion from the stress that they were feeling about where they were eventually going to live. And next, please. My sister learned Portuguese. Here she is. She's about 3, I guess, by now, standing between 2 refugee children. I know the little boy on her left was a refugee because I saw him in other pictures with her, and 4 Portuguese children. Do you know that my mother, this is funny, my mother taught French in Portugal for a short while, and she had a babysitter, 2 or 3 girls. One had a little white puppy dog. I have pictures of those. So I have 54 pictures from Portugal. I think I have a treasure. If a museum wants them, contact me. And so they were embraced by the Portuguese people, by the Portuguese children, and by the adults. And next, please. Here you see my parents in front of the famous Farol de Santa Catarina. Yvonne is wearing a mignotte dress. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And it was not a gift, but a loan to her for that day by a man named Mr. Malafaia. We're going to see him now.
Could you elaborate more on the day she got this gift? How did she get the gift? It's in your book.
Oh, Mr. Malafaia brought this dress for Yvonne to wear for Carnival because his daughter, Maria Luisa, was already 7 years old and the dress was too small for her. So he brought it for her to wear. And I don't know the exact words that he said, but I think it was something like, why should the children suffer? We have no carnival, no parade, but why should the children suffer? So let her enjoy it. And so they paraded around the town in that beautiful, beautiful costume. Now here is Mr. Malafaia on my mother's right. And so it's Mr. Malafaia, my mother, and my father. standing in front of the Mercedes that they drove all the way to Figueira da Foz. People have asked me, men in particular, where did they get spare parts? A car like that doesn't make a journey for so many miles or kilometers without something breaking down. Where did they get parts? I said, I don't know. It's not something that I didn't ask my mother because, you know, we're not men, so we don't think about those things. But it so happens that let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Malafaia, please. Mr. Malafaia was the director of the waterworks in Figueira da Foz for many, many years. He was also the honorary vice consul of Spain in Figueira. I believe that since he had been, and he was that for many years before these refugees came, and I believe that since there was no tourism from Spain, but he was used to welcoming people. He welcomed refugees. In fact, I know there's another family, and I should Cookie Fisher and her cousin, which if I don't remember her name, I'm gonna get shot. In any case,
is it Elizabeth and Dries?
Yes. You know everything. You know everything, Inês. Thank you. Elizabeth and Dries, who I have been, I've never met Cookie, but I've met Elizabeth many times. She's marvelous. They were also in Figueira for a time, and they had a man who was like a patron or adopted their family. So I think it was not unusual for someone to take a special interest in a family. Mr. Malafaia took my parents all over, not all over, but in many places in Portugal. For instance, I think we have another picture. This is Busaco. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes, it's correct. It's Busaco.
Busaco, the palace, which is outside of the city of Coimbra, in the province of Coimbra, I believe. And
actually, I have a question about that. Usually refugees were forbidden from going further than a very limited number of kilometers from the places where they were housed. Your family was actually housed in Figueira da Foz, not out of choice, but out of a decision of the Portuguese state that refugees who came in with Sousa Mendes visas in particular were directed to Figueira da Foz. How did your parents manage to get authorization? I mean, did they get authorization, or were they doing it, let's say, illegally at the time?
Illegally, please. I believe that Mr. Malafaia, with his connections, since he was director of the waterworks and a very important man in the town, got permission to go. I don't have any pictures of them on their own visiting places. He was always there with them. So I believe that he got the permissions. That's what I believe. Now, here, I don't think anyone in our audience has ever seen a picture like this. It's quite iconic. That is Portugal dos Pequenitos in 1941, approximately, and my sister Yvonne standing in front of that globe. The globe is not there anymore.
No.
So there was a very limited amount of time to take a picture like that, I believe. So anyone who knows better than me, which is probably everyone in the audience, correct me, okay? I'm ready to be corrected. And then, oh, here they are, Mr. Malafaia and my mother in the iconic photo in front of Boca do Inferno. Wow. From Figueira to Boca do Inferno. Now, Inês asked me, well, do you think they stayed over someplace? I said, I don't think that, and my father took the picture. I don't think they stayed over anywhere. I think they made the trip in one day.
It would have been a tiresome trip at the time. It could have been done, but it would have been a tiresome trip at the time. to this. I think today Figueira da Foz is about 1.5 hours to 2 hours away from Cascais. I did that journey once. I took 2 hours, but I'm a slow driver, and but I had highways. For those of you who know Cascais, this is of course the balcony that overlooks Boca do Inferno. Boca do Inferno means hell's mouth, and it refers to what you do not see here, which is the way the sea looks in winter and how hellish it looks. And there is a re-entrance here that you don't see. It's outside the photograph, where the sea, it's a small cove, and so the sea rises up high. And this is the balcony that overlooks it. And it had just been inaugurated then, so it was this fresh construction made to encourage tourism in what was called at the time the Costa do Sol, the Sun Coast. And for those of you who like lighthouses, right here is the Guia lighthouse, which is what allows us to identify this photograph with all certainty. And you can see here a recent picture, and you see here at the back again the Guia lighthouse, the balcony, and again you see what we mean by intense seas at hell's mouth. So for those of you who haven't been to Cascais yet, I hope you, when you come here, you do come in winter, so you get to see the sea at its best.
Mariana Abrantes took me to Cascais, to the Boca do Inferno and Estoril, and when I was there one year, I don't remember which one. She's a fabulous woman who is the treasurer of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. Mariana Abrantes knows this story since she was a young girl, where she lived in the town in Belgium, next to Casa
do Passal.
Yeah, next to the Casa do Passal, and she passed in her bus to school every day, and nobody really even knew what that old building was and why it was so deteriorated. I believe. So Mariana brought me.
For those who don't know Casa do Passal, it is in a place called Cabanas de Viriato in north central Portugal, and it is the homestead of Aristides de Sousa Mendes and his children. It's quite a singular construction. It's very influenced by French architecture, and it is currently under refurbishment, headed by the Fundação Sousa Mendes, and hopefully a museum will open there soon, which will honor the life and the deeds of Sousa Mendes and the lives that he helped save. This photograph here that you shared with us, we initially wanted it to have been taken in Cascais. And in conversation, some of us thought that we had identified here the Dona de Maria Pia boardwalk in Cascais, which is in central Cascais overlooking the sea here. But because there's such dense construction here at the back, we now think that this might have been taken in Almada, which is on the south side of the River Tagus, overlooking Lisbon. And so it may be that on this day, your parents and Alberto Malafaia actually went through either a ferry trip with or without their car, but went on a ferry trip from Lisbon to Cascais. We know that those ferry trips existed at some stage during the period to Cascais, and then from Cascais into Lisbon, and from Lisbon into the other side, and then back. And so this is what we think is, this is where we think this photograph was taken. But if anyone has other ideas, please let us know in the Q&A panel.
Excuse me, Inês,
Sure.
I do have a photo of my mother and father on a boat, on a ferry. So
it's quite, if they're wearing the same outfit, we need to
yes,
check.
Yes,
it's possible that it is on the same trip.
The same exact day,
No.
I believe.
So while you were in Figueira da Foz, of course, your family was looking forward, was looking to leave the country and to escape, but it was also maintaining correspondence with those who were left behind in war-torn Europe. And so I'm going to share here an image that you sent us of a postcard that was sent to your parents.
Yes, This is how I know that they were residents at Rua Santo Mayor, number 10. El Capuan is Leon, my mother's brother. He returned during the war of the, let me just go back a minute. In 1939, in September, my uncle Leon was in the Polish army. Like all good Jews of the right age, went into the Polish army, okay? They were good citizens of Poland. Now, he was trapped at the Battle of the Bzura River, and I know that for a fact because other postcards tell me that. And he was taken to Stalag 2A in Germany. And my mother even has postcards. They're in my book. I've written a book, and I've shared 100 photos and documents of my mother's journey, my family's journey. So he was there. And the Red Cross, she got a letter from her sister who was, I think she was already in the Warsaw Ghetto, or maybe outside before she was enclosed in the Warsaw Ghetto, that Lolek, Leon, could receive packages. So I have the letters from his receipt in Stalag 2A. But they couldn't, the Germans didn't want to keep them there. I guess it was too much trouble for them. They sent them back to Poland, and then they put them all in the Warsaw Ghetto. So my mother's family ended up in the Warsaw Ghetto. Żelazna Street, 69-3 is the outermost address in the Warsaw Ghetto. And of course, they were under the General Government. Okay.
And if you notice here, the stamp actually has it written also, General Government.
Yes, and the swastika and the eagle.
Yeah. So it's a clear, I mean, it's these sort of correspondence attests to what the sort of organization was on the ground at the time.
So, and they were asking for food and also clothing. And the Germans, up to a certain date, allowed them to receive packages to the Warsaw Ghetto. Okay. This is some correspondence from my grandmother Celia to my mother Hala, from the Warsaw Ghetto to my mother in Portugal. And she writes, "Dearest, what's by you? How does sweet Papcha feel?" Papcha is a sweet way to refer to Ivan, their baby. "Renia is sitting next to me, forcing me to write that Marcish is a genius. I'm sending you sweet regards and kisses." I'm asking you, how do people in that situation maintain a sense of humor? Something that I will never understand. Next. This is the last picture that we have of Ivan in Portugal, in Figueira, in 1941. I bet some people from Figueira can recognize the spot where this picture was taken. I think she's wearing a dress that maybe my aunt sewed for her, because at the time, you know, things were getting, she was growing, she needed clothing, and my aunt was a seamstress, or she became a seamstress, a very famous seamstress, as a matter of fact, in America. Okay, next, please. And this is the train to Lisbon on January 23rd, 1942. It's a testament to the feeling that both Mr. Malafaia and my family had for each other. You can see Mr. Malafaia in back of my mother in the shadow over there. He went on the train with them all the way, probably to the boat. Now, how do I know it's January 23rd in 1942? Do you see? Can we see here? Is that clear to read?
Yes, I think so. It reads Caldas da Rainha, 23rd January 1942, Portugal.
And like we showed before, this is the stamp of the
photographer studio. It's Talia, and it is in Caldas da Rainha. So we're quite curious, and I know that Carlos Guerreiro registered for this talk, and I know that some of the Figueira da Foz people also registered. So if any of you has any idea on how this worked, this system of taking photographs at train stations, because clearly they're not. This isn't the terminal station, and it's not the first station. It's one station along the way, and they're being photographed inside the train, and then they get the photograph. How does that work? Basically, we're very curious. So if any of you know how they ended up with the picture that was taken of them at the train station, we'd be very curious.
Yeah. How did my mother get it?
How
did my mother get it? I bet nobody knows. I don't think there's anyone who could know. And so this is the letter which says that the refugees, there were about 147 or 157 of them, Polish Jews, would be taken care of at Camp Gibraltar, which was on the island of Jamaica, British West Indies. Now, the British government in exile, the Polish government in exile, the British government and the American Jewish Joint arranged this evacuation of my parents on the 24th of January. And I say evacuation because at that time, the PVDE, the surveillance police in Portugal, were making lists of refugees who were still in Portugal and handing those lists to the Nazis. So this was an evacuation. And excuse me, can we go back, please? You see here, the first one on the list is my grandma, Friendla, which was her Jewish name. She was Julia, but her Jewish name was probably Friendla. And then my mother, father, and the rest of the family who you know about. What happened to Friendla? My mother said she didn't go to the camp. So I believe that this boat went further to Cuba, and somehow or other, my grandma went to Cuba, but I have not been able to trace those steps yet. Next, please. This is the Serpa Pinta, a ship that was made for I don't know how many, became overcrowded with refugees, people sleeping on the deck, people sleeping in the hold. It was a mess. And it was a ship that was also lit up at night with Portugal, was lit up at night somehow so that the Nazis would not torpedo them. And at some point during the trip, I have some testimony that says the ship was stopped. German officers came on the ship and checked all of the papers to see who was on the ship. And then somebody told me, in all the people that I've met, that in Jamaica, they found a German soldier who was trying to get away. I'm not clear on that story. I could get you more if somebody was interested, more detail. So this is the evacuee camp called Gibraltar Camp.
So if I can just interrupt here, the Gibraltar evacuee camp was originally designed to shelter British nationals from Gibraltar. We know that some refugees from Gibraltar, British nationals, were sheltered in the islands of Madeira, but this camp had been designed to shelter between 1,500 to 2,000 refugees from Gibraltar during the war. That's what it was built for. And then through negotiations, it also started sheltering European Jewish refugees like the Krakowiaks.
And do you know why there was space available to shelter those European refugees? Because it was also supposed to shelter refugees from another country. And I'm sorry, I didn't do my research to remind me. But those people came, the officials from that country, I don't remember, came, looked at the camp and said, we don't want our people to be supervised by blacks. so we're not going to come. And that is the reason there was space available for my family and 157 Polish Jews, and then later many, many Dutch Jews who came. And the next, please. Oh, yes.
So in the camp, originally, nobody could work. The idea was that refugees could not work, but your father found a way around it.
Yes. Actually, he was solicited to come and be the gym teacher at Jamaica College. Jamaica College, it was a high school really, and a private school, and their gymnastic teacher was a British subject who went to serve in the war. So there was a space, they needed a teacher. My father was a gymnast. He was a member of Maccabi Varsha. He was a wrestler. He did jiu-jitsu and gymnastics. So they asked him to come. He bought a bicycle so that he wouldn't have to take a bus and be dependent on a bus. So he bought a rickety old bicycle and went to his work on the bicycle. And my mother said, "Ignash, you're going to learn English. How wonderful." And when she went to a reception at the camp, everyone was speaking French to my father. It turns out that they wanted to speak French with him, and he didn't learn much English there. But the point of the story is that he had this bicycle, and in the afternoons, he made a seat for Yvonne to, she was almost 4 years old now, to sit on the back, and they would travel through the camp and you know, pass people and wave to them, and everybody knew them. Everybody in the camp knew them. On one day in particular, he hit a rut in the road. I don't know how it happened because my mother never, ever spoke about it. But her foot got trapped in the wheel. They fell over. She was bloodied and mangled. And my father ran with her to the infirmary. And the doctor in the infirmary said, "Yeah, we'll take care of it here." And but it developed into sepsis, into blood poisoning. And I have testimony that I'd like to read to you from 3 children who were there at the time. The first one to tell me about what happened and how my sister passed, okay? The first one was a boy of 4. When she didn't come back from the infirmary, it was a tremendous shock to us. When we were older, our parents told us that Yvonne died of sepsis, a result of her injury from the bicycle accident, even though Ignash begged on bended knees. The commandant would not move her to a regular hospital where they might have saved her with better medical treatment. It wasn't a question of money. Other refugee friends would have chipped in, but the willful commandant refused. Now, this boy's sister said, she was 6 years old at the time. "We lived in the cubicle next to Yvonne and her parents in the barracks at Gibraltar camp. I played with her as if she were my little doll. And when she did not come back from the infirmary, my mother had to tell me what happened. I remember after Yvonne died, Hala didn't go out in public for 1 year." And there was a third boy who was there. I won't read his testimony right now, but a third boy who was there, he was 13 years at the camp, and he said, "Yvonne was a lovely, intelligent, and vivacious little girl. I remember babysitting for her a couple of times. Her illness came suddenly." Now, I wonder if you people know the name Maurice Templesman. Inês knew who he was. He was Jackie Kennedy's 3rd partner. I don't know if they married really, but he was Jackie Kennedy's.
Never married.
No, they didn't marry, but he was her companion. And when my mother, when this became, you know, public and was in the news, my mother said, "I was at his bar mitzvah. He was bar mitzvahed at Camp Gibraltar. Okay, that's a little aside. But anyway,
So this,
I have the
this
yeah, I have the cards. I have these cards. They're in my book as well. And there was a leader of the group, and he had to report to the HISM, which was the Jewish organization that was supervising their stay in Jamaica. And he says, "Dear sirs, yesterday we had a rather bad day, and decidedly nothing will be spared to us, as we have had the first deceased among us, a little girl of 4." And that was Yvonne. And this is the memorial photo that my mother gave me in 1997, but never spoke her name. She gave me a slim vinyl album with all of Yvonne's photos. I had to look on the I was supposed to prepare that album for today. I had to look at the inside of the cover to read Yvonne, June the 1st, 1938. No, excuse me. June the 1st, 1938, June the 4th, 1942. And that's the first time I knew her name. And this is the grave at the Orange Tree Cemetery in Kingston, Jamaica, where Yvonne was buried. And this is the stone. And Inês, you can see it better than me. Can you read that?
So it says, I will translate as I read. It's written in French, and it says, "Here lies our adored little girl, Yvonne Krakowiak. She was born the 1st June 1938. She died the 4th of June 1942, the only child of Halina and Ignaz Krakowiak."
And so there is her stone and her grave and flowers. This was 1942. Okay, we'll see the next. Oh, what happened to? We don't have the other photo with the 3?
No, I do. That one comes further. Your
okay.
family, after the death
Yeah.
of Yvonne, your family stayed at Camp Gibraltar,
Yes.
but was eventually able to leave to the United States and to make a life in the United States. So by 1945, by the end of the war, your mother was pregnant with you, I believe.
Yes.
And here is a photograph of your family home in America, with the paneled house at the back, and the door that opens and shuts easily, and the family outside. So this is you.
Yes. Inês, I didn't supply Inês with this photo, but she found it because she's very, I don't know the right word to say, industrious, and even more than that. Here's my mother. There I am sitting in my father's lap. My father, my mother, and Fela, one of the women that I called my aunt because I didn't have much family. All the refugees became aunts and uncles. Now, you see our house at number 3 Cohill Road in Valley Stream, the absolute beginning of when we arrived there. This is 1951. They arrived in 43. My father started by schlepping, that means dragging boxes at a warehouse. Then he developed his own business and went selling scales to diamond dealers, many of whom were saved by Sousa Mendes, and all spoke French, so it was very easy for him to develop a business on 47th Street in Manhattan. And when he sold his first 4 scales to Tiffany and Company, he came home and he said, "Hala, we're going to buy a house." And she said, "Ignaz, you're crazy." He said, "No, I can do it." And here it is, the house. They put $200 down and had a mortgage for $59 a month. Imagine, that was 1951. I want you to look, excuse me, please, at the grass and the little bit of shrubbery that my father planted there. And up on the right, on the sill of the stones there, going into the door, that's his Argus camera that he brought from Belgium with him. Okay, next. And here we are in 1981. I have my arms over my father's shoulders, and my brother, who you heard in the video, who helped me to make the video in 1989, that's Richard. He's grown up. He was married also. My mother is sitting there holding my youngest child, Roni, and she was 6 years old. This was her baby naming day, and sitting next to her on the right is Corinne. He was 4, and Guy, the oldest, was 7 in 1981.
So your family went back to Jamaica. They came back to Portugal at different times to retrace their steps and to also to honor Yvonne's memory.
Yes. The picture that you see there is on the upper left is 1942. And you see the building in the back? That was the house where they, I imagine, prepared the bodies and things like that. I'm not sure about that. But my parents went back in 1960 to Jamaica, and you can see her grave was still there, and they put probably those yellow flowers. And then in 1977, on the right, you can see that my parents took a trip where they went through Spain, probably started in France, or Belgium, maybe. They probably started in Belgium, but I have these pictures from Salonika, and then over to Lisboa, to Lisbon.
So that would be Salamanca and Lisbon.
Salamanca, excuse me, and Lisbon. And that was 1977. And I found out later through my journeys to Portugal and meeting Alberto Malafaya's grandchildren, that Alberto Malafaya died in 1975. So if my father did go to Figueira and did try to find him, it was too late. The picture that you see here on the lower right is the same grave in 2014. I took that picture. Now you see the grave has been destroyed, desecrated, people looking for marble. So in 2017, so when I was there and I saw the grave was destroyed, I contacted the synagogue, and they put me in touch with Ainsley Enriquez and David Matalon. They are stepbrothers. Their family were the people in Gibraltar camp, in Kingston, who invited the refugees from Gibraltar camp to their home for holidays, for other things, to make their time in the camp more palatable, let's say. My parents were in the camp for 18 months. So they were 18 months in Figueira and 18 months in the camp. So I calculated that it was 1,241 days, their journey. So in 1917, we went back to Gibraltar camp because
that would have been 2017, not 1917. It's okay.
Thank you. We went back for what was labeled a reunion. There was one woman, a Dutch woman, who was there and her family, and I went as a representative of my family. We went to this reunion which was organized by a woman who wrote a book about Gibraltar camp. Very few people know about Gibraltar camp. So it was a wonderful tribute to those refugees who were there. And I had the opportunity, they brought the whole group to the cemetery, and this is what happened at the cemetery. You can play the video.
David Matalon was with me. He opened the cemetery and he brought me to the stone cutter, and we chose this stone and we put the same exact inscription on the grave. And here we are today. We were here, just Itzhak and I, and my mother was here with my father. She said nobody was here. No books, no rabbi, nothing. So here we are today. Isn't that great? To honor her and her experience. Thank you.
We invite Inai and Stephen Enriquez to lead us with the Kaddish. אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים.
So
Joan, for those who don't understand very well what you were saying at the beginning,
okay.
and for those who don't understand what they've just watched, could you explain what is happening here?
Yes. Well, there was a reunion of people who were at Gibraltar camp to honor their experience. I went as a representative of my family. You saw in the film, in the very beginning, me speaking, and in back of me to my, thank you, to my left, that is Ainsley Enriquez. He is one of the leaders of the congregation in Kingston, Jamaica, of the only synagogue that remains in Kingston, Jamaica. To my right is my husband, Itzhak. And that's the building that you saw in the picture from 1942. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of my sister's, the stone that we put, but it looks a little bit flat, like the one you see in back of that man. And we engraved everything that was written on the first stone. Now, Ainsley called a man up to intone the Kaddish, which is the prayer we say for the dead. It's the very first time that anyone said a prayer for Yvonne, and it was a very important moment for me. The man who you'll see at the end, his name is Eli Gabay. Now, in looking him up to remember his name, I found out that he was the Attorney General in Israel who prosecuted Ivan the Terrible, the man who they brought from the United States, who was by many survivors blamed for pushing people into the ovens and into the gas chambers at Treblinka and Sobibor. Now, my mother's family, we'll see later, all went to Treblinka, and so it was quite something to understand that this man who fought against one of the Nazi criminals came and he said the Kaddish on my sister's grave. Next, please. So here you see the little doll, one of the
I'm going to interrupt you just to let you know that we've passed 10 o'clock. So now we're going to just speed up a little bit. Okay.
This is the little doll from a present from Mr. Malafaia when my parents left Portugal, the filigree caravel, another present from Mr. Malafaia. The doll I donated to the Frontiera de Paz Museum, and there you see me with the president of Portugal, who everybody knows, Marcelo, reading to him. I read him those cards about my sisters that were sent back to New York about my sister's death, and he started reading along with me. It's not the first time that I met the president, and it's not the first time that he has my book already, because the Sousa Mendes Foundation often visits the palace, or is invited to the palace when we are on the journey on the road to freedom. And
could you tell me a bit more about the caravel and your plans for it?
This caravel, I would be very happy if it would find a place in a museum in Portugal. Right now, excuse me, it's in Luisa Malafaia's home, because in 2017, when I came to Portugal and I had wonderful receptions at different schools, I gave the caravel to Alberto Malafaia, the son, too, I call him Alberto too, to give to his mother, to keep it until we're ready, a museum accepts it. So she has it now.
Well, God, hopefully there are a number of museums at this moment that are being prepared to honor this legacy, and so hopefully one of them will be very interested. We are finishing our conversation, and just as much as we talked about your family and their loss along the way and the life they built in the United States, I wanted to go back to those first photographs of your family. And you've already mentioned that on your father's side, your grandfather, Abraham, he died in 1933, and all of his brothers actually were able to leave before it was too late, and they made their lives, they built their lives in these different cities where they eventually died. On the Kaplan side, the situation was a little bit different. And if we go back to that picture taken in July, late July 1939, barely a month before the German invasion of Poland, we find out that all of them were murdered in the Holocaust. Very likely for part of them, they were murdered in Treblinka in 1942 during the evacuation of the Warsaw Ghetto, the extermination of the Warsaw Ghetto, I'm sorry. And Frida and Max, the location to where they were deported and then murdered is unknown. So the young boy that appears on the postcard from the Warsaw Ghetto, being described as a genius by his mother via the grandmother, died in 1942 in Treblinka. Joan, when did your mother find out about her family?
My mother found out that no one went back to Lodz, to Łódź, in 1945. The war was over. I was in her womb because I was born in June of 1945. In May, the war was over, and she wrote to the address in Łódź that she knew everyone would go back to because the apartment building was owned on Piotrkowska Street, was owned by my grandfather. So if anybody was alive, they would go back, and the postcard came back, returned to sender.
We're going to finish this presentation by hearing your mother and hearing how your mother looks back on this part of her life.
I don't know, Rosemary always said that I'm strong, and I said, I don't know, what are you talking about? Where am I strong? I don't think so. But now that I went through this whole thing, I can see that I am strong, no? To go through all this. It's really have to be strong, sure.
Well, and you have a positive attitude.
But I must say that Daddy taught me a lot about surviving. And all the way from Europe to Portugal, he said, they are not going to get us. We're going to get out. He was very strong. He loved life, and he said, I'm going to live. And many times Paul said, I don't want to go any further. That's it. I have enough. So he said, you go back, but not me. You can go back by yourself, not me.
So what was Daddy's mother saying all the while in that trip?
She was with Daddy. She thought, Paul, what, you want to go be devoured by the animals, the Germans, the Nazis?
But nobody had any idea about camps.
No, but they knew that going back is going to death. We didn't know about gas chambers and all this. Not even in Jamaica. We didn't know that. Not until we came here.
Then you couldn't believe it.
No.
Joan's book is available at the Exiles Memorial Center Library, as is the catalog of the Museum of Vilar Formoso, Fronteira da Paz, Joan's blog, and Joan's website with more information about her family history and all of the educational visits to schools and other groups that Joan does is mysisterseyes.com. And of course, Joan, we want to thank you for sharing with us today your family history, all of this documentation, and for telling people such a long and complex story. I'm going to interrupt here our share, and we're going to move now to the second part of our talk, which is the questions and answers. And we've already have a number of questions. The first comment is by Raquel Caldeira, who from Figueira da Foz, I presume because she tells you she wants to share the same information that I gave you earlier today, which is that the building where your family lived in Rua Sotomayor has been demolished and no longer stands. Carlos Guerreiro says, I have no idea how this photographic system may have come about. He does conjecture that it may have been taken with the camera of Mr. Malafaia, who would have sent it to the US, but it's unlikely because the studio that printed the photograph is in Caldas da Rainha, and he was from Figueira da Foz. So we think it's unlikely that he would have the film developed in Caldas da Rainha, since he seems to have taken the train all the way into Lisbon, which is why we're confused. So Helena Baltazar.
No, 1 minute.
Yes.
1 minute. My mother never got any correspondence from Alberto Malafaia. I have none. If she had it, she would have kept it because did we show this yet? All of the beautiful gifts.
We're going to show. We're going to show a little bit further along.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And so. Helena Baltazar, who is from Figueira da Foz, says, my grandmother is 96 years old and she used to go to Lisbon by train. I'm going to ask her if she remembers how these photographs were taken. Helena, that would be wonderful if you can share with us those memories. We might have some answers on that front. And she asks your permission to mention your collection to the mayor of Figueira da Foz, since she's certain that the city council would be very interested in having a copy of those photographs, if you are willing to share it. Okay, so Ana Maria Sobrinho says that the photograph that you shared of your father, that in the background it's not Salamanca, it's Toledo.
Oh,
so I think
so
I recognize in the back Salamanca, but
is it on the way?
The photograph in 1977. It could be on the way. Yeah, it could be. It could be. It's not. I mean, I did the immigrant route from Portugal to Belgium for about 9 years, and we never stopped in Toledo. But I know that my mother once did when she was driving on her own. So clearly, you can do a detour. So it makes it's a possibility for sure that they would have taken that route.
Thank you
now,
for the clarification.
Now, and Esther, who is a Hungarian film director who lives here in Portugal, and says, thank you so much for telling the story and for helping to remember. We need it so much right now. We need to study the past. I have some questions. First of all, clearly, in addition to the intensity of the exodus of your family and the way they lived it, along the way, they seem to have encountered these people, these helpers. You know, the Mr. Rogers. There's always the story about Mr. Rogers telling the story of when he was a child, that he would feel overwhelmed by a situation, that his mother would say, "Look for the helpers." There's always helpers in a terrible situation. There's always going to be the helpers. And when you tell your story, clearly you see these figures appearing, whether Sousa Mendes, whether the British soldier who hand over this petrol, or Alberto Malafaia, or the David Matalon in Jamaica. welcoming the Jewish refugees and giving them a sense of belonging in a place that was not catering to their lives. And I think that this is a very important aspect of when you share your story, that you are able to identify so many of these people that made that choice to help, to go out of their way and help. And in that sense, I'm curious about if you could talk to us about your family's property, but in particular, what happened to this apartment, to the apartment in Avenue des Cerisiers when your parents leave and lock the door. What's left behind? What happens to these things? And if there are these helpers that step in.
Mm-hmm. Well, in 1945, around 1946, in 1946, my father went back to Belgium because he was still struggling to make a living. And he thought, maybe we'll go back to Europe and reestablish ourselves in Belgium. So he went back to the address which we saw over there, and he went, and the landlady was there, and she welcomed him, and she said, "Here, look what I saved for you." I don't know if our participants can see. This is a crystal and silver candy dish, and this is a crystal and silver vase, flower vase. She kept them. She kept them for them. Not only that, she kept this. Well, all right, she kept them. She kept their down pillows, their down comforters, which he brought back to America, and I slept with until I went to college. And believe me, it wasn't fun. All the feathers coming out and everything. But she kept this. This is the photo album.
Would you tell us more about this album?
This is the photo album that my father brought back with him from Mandate, Palestine, after he went there as a volunteer to build a state, because he was a Zionist. He was a member of Maccabi Varsha. And he left Poland to be a volunteer in Israel to a kibbutz. And he had a job as a truck driver, and he had to drive a big amount of trucks over a bridge, and so the bridge wasn't strong enough. He had to take the bricks off and walk them across the bridge, walk them all across the bridge, then he could drive the truck. And somehow he had an accident and he twisted his knee, broke his knee. I don't know exactly what happened. So he wasn't useful anymore, and he went back to Warsaw. And his mommy said, "Szczęśliwą godzinę," which means in a good hour. Thank God he's back.
He's back.
Thank God he's back. So I want to say that you hear about all of the looting and the and the unpleasant or criminal, not criminal, the things that went on. And here was a lady saved their valuable and even not so valuable things for when they would come back.
And another question that I have it pertains to this relationship, with this friendship with Alberto Malafaia, and and how extraordinary it is that, I mean, clearly he goes out of his way to accompany and to somehow settle your family in during their stay, which on account of their nationality was clearly going to be a long stay. And he and these parting gifts, the gift of the doll that he gives to your sister Yvonne, and then the gifts he gives to your mother and your father. I know that you have some there. If you could share them with us.
Yes, this was not a parting gift. You see this? This is a compact, and it says HK Krakowiak, or Kaplan, not Krakowiak. This is not a parting gift because it's engraved inside, and it says 11/8/41. So that was their anniversary. This is an anniversary gift that Alberto Malafaia gave to my mother. He gave my father a letter opener with a medallion, a red medallion with a white cross. I know you know that's very, very important in Portugal, also engraved with the date. And then on another occasion, he gave my sister a bracelet like this one. This is not the bracelet because unfortunately, I don't know why I lost it somehow, but engraved on it was her birthday, June the 1st, and it was in 1941. So he gave her presents. I don't know. I asked my mother, what was it? What was it about Alberto Malafaia? She said, Alberto Malafaia was the I don't know, director or the something for the soccer team in Figueira for many, many years. He loved soccer. My father loved sports. She said they bonded over sports. They just liked each other.
But it ends up being surprising that in the end that no contact was maintained, or apparently no contact was maintained once the family left. That idea that, this is it, now you move on to the next group of helpers along the way.
Wait a minute. You know what? My mother didn't go straight to the United States where she had an address. She went to Camp Gibraltar. She got nothing from, from her family in Camp Gibraltar, in Gibraltar Camp, right? But when she got to America, she knew probably Alberto's address. She could have written to him. I don't know what happened. I don't know. But that didn't stop me from making a very strong connection with Alberto too, which I call him. He's the grandson, Alberto, who lives in Figueira. 1 minute. And Graça, his wife, wonderful, and Maria Teresa, his sister, who's an English teacher, all in Figueira, and I have a lovely relationship with them. So we're maintaining it.
Another question that I have is, you've alluded throughout now your talk that you recorded your mother's this testimony in 1989. Now, clearly, you were ahead of the curve in this need to have to take witness, to take testimony of her own experience. But in that recording, she does not mention Yvonne and losing Yvonne. And in fact, you only found out about that you had a sister when you were already a preteen.
Yes. Yes. When we asked my mother about her baby, because we didn't know her name in 1989, 89, I didn't know her name. When we asked her about her baby, she said it's been 47 years or so many years.
I'm sorry, Joan, let me just, in 1989, you did not know the name of this sister that she,
no,
this child that she lost?
No, because we asked her, tell us about your baby. And she said, I cannot speak about her. I cannot speak about her. Only in 1997, I did something for her where I said a very big thing. I went back to Poland and I recuperated her grandfather's properties for her. That was a very big deal because I was the third person to do that in Łódź, Poland, okay? And I said, now, Mommy, you have to tell me. And so she gave me a thin vinyl album. In the cover, it was written Yvonne, Yvonne, June the 1st, 1938 to June the 4th, 1942. That's the first time I knew her name. And she gave me the pictures. And she gave me the correspondence from her family, from the ghetto. I said, read it to me because I spoke Polish. Polish was my our language at home. And because I didn't read or write, but I understood the language. Read them to me. She said, no. So eventually, when I started writing this book, I brought that correspondence to a woman who read them to me. We recorded it, and that's how I was able to write down all of that correspondence in the back of my book. I found out about my sister in 1956. In 1956, I was 11 years old, and we went to my brother was just born, and we went to the country to in the Catskills, the very famous Jewish Catskills, and I went to a pool. There was a pool, Bear Mountain State Park, and I went in and I started fluttering around in the water. And there was a man who was looking at me. He was wearing a bathing suit, just like my father's, which was very European and unusual. And he called me over to the side of the pool and he said, "Take me to your father." I heard a Polish accent. People were not afraid of strangers in those days. I brought him to my father, and then they knew each other. And they were talking. And I said to my mother, eventually they started crying. And I said, "Why are they crying?" Probably Daddy just told him the bad news. So I said, "What bad news? About your sister? What sister?" And she said had to tell me that they had a baby who died on the way. Well, anyway, and that's all she would tell me. Well, that was shocking, right? So I was 11 years old. We just had a new, I was the princess. Did you see me in my father's lap? I was his princess. So we just had a boy, 11 years, you know what boys mean, right? And then I find out that I'm not the first child, but I'm the middle child, which carries with it a lot of stuff. And
clearly what we see here in your book is the research you've undertaken on your own. You've discovered information on your own. You were no longer able to share it with your parents, or to sort of to talk about it, to discuss it with either of your parents. So why did you do it? Why did you go and find out more about Yvonne, about your sister?
everybody does. Did you notice there's a surge of people going back to their second generation, third generation, going back and retracing the steps? We want to know, because my parents were not the only ones who didn't want to talk about it. Some families did talk about it. I think Jean Van Italy, his family, well, he was there, and they did talk about it. But my parents did not want to talk about it. In fact, I would never even get the feeling that my mother had such a big loss, except once a year on Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, she would stay in bed. And I said to her, "Mommy, come to synagogue with Daddy and me. What's the matter?" She said, "No, this is the day that I get to mourn for my family." So she put it in a box. I call it in my book, her New World skeleton closet. Put it in a box, and she lived life, and I never knew anything. I never felt that sadness, really. They raised me as a happy child.
So they embraced.
Yeah, so why am I sharing it now? And I've been very, very particular about not sharing my mother's videos. Like I said, this is about the first time I've done it, and then I did it again for a video for students in Figueira de Foz. Why am I doing it now? Because it's important. It's important that we tell the stories. There are deniers. People who say the Holocaust didn't happen. People who say, well, wasn't that bad. So it's important, whoever has a story to tell, they tell it. And that's why I'm doing it.
Joan, I certainly want to thank you for sharing the story with us. We have some more comments of people thanking you for your testimony right now. One of them, of course, you know, is Dores do Carmo. Maria
Yes.
Lourdes Rubon also says, thank you for your testimony. Now, Pedro Felgar asks a very specific question, which is about the fear in Poland of the possibility of the return of Polish Jews and their descendants. Can you comment? I'm not sure, Pedro, if you refer here to the post-war return of the displaced people, or if you're talking about it now. But now, okay, Pedro specifies talking about now. What is your relationship with Poland right now?
My last relationship with Poland was in 1997 when I recuperated my mother's apartment, my great-grandfather's apartment buildings for my mother. What they're afraid of having Jews come back is that they have claims to property that was stolen from them. I believe that's what it is. I was the third person in Łódź to do that, to take property back. After that, the window of opportunity was closed. Maybe now it's opening it again. I think that's the fear, you know. Nobody was displaced from the apartments that I recuperated. I didn't keep them. I sold them to Polish people. So, you know, everybody stayed and lived where they were. But my mother was recompensed for her loss. Not enough for the loss of her family, but that wasn't the Polish people. So that was not the Polish people who did that.
So Patricia Brum, thanks you for sharing your story. Cândida cada vez, thank you so much. We do need to be aware of these testimonies more than ever, I would say. And Mariana Abrantes, of course, is here. Hello, Mariana. Parabéns, congratulations. The lovely book, My Sister's Eyes, is wonderful. And I can confirm, because I have it right here with me, this is the book, and it has the little Exiles Memorial Center tag.
And may I make the announcement now? May I make the announcement? Is it the time?
Yes, you can definitely make the announcement now.
So the Sousa Mendes Foundation would like to offer the Exilios, you know, museum, a class copy of my book to be used with students who come to visit you, or if you would like to loan it out to schools in your area to study and read. Doris knows, and Elena knows, and Josefa knows that I speak with students. I answer their questions. When they have questions, you know, we do Zooms and I answer questions. So it's a wonderful relationship that I'm keeping with the beautiful teachers who honor the Holocaust and are in the forefront of Holocaust education in Portugal. I believe that they're in the forefront. And so we are donating 25 copies to you.
Thank you very, very much. We certainly appreciate it. As you know, we run history labs for high schoolers mostly. We do them on Zoom. We do it in person, not now. We will resume them soon. And we really want to integrate this sort of this family narrative into the kind of educational activities we do with our schools, precisely because we think that through empathy, we find a way into being able to teach history and to teach what happened, more than just giving out historical facts and numbers with which sometimes it is difficult to develop a relationship. So thank you so very much. We really, really appreciate it, and we will be putting it to good use, as you will know. The comments have just started.
May I just tell you one thing. So Elena Romao from Figueira reads my book with her 9th graders, because that's Holocaust history is a part of the 9th grade, and she's an English teacher, so she combines those things.
Yeah.
The class sent me questions, and one of the questions was, how do you feel about what happened to your family? And I said, I think that I was robbed. For instance, I said, students, I bet many of you have grandparents. You know, maybe they're not alive today, or they were. You knew your grandparents. I never knew my grandparents. I never knew my aunts and uncles on my mother's side, who was a very lively group of people with a great sense of humor, you know, lots of fun. They were fun. My mother always said how wonderful it was to be in their home. And I never had that. So how would I feel? And that's the way I answer the questions about how it affected me.
So Isabel de Sousa says, wonderful, thank you very much. Sylvia Pacheco says, thank you very much for sharing your story. I visited Auschwitz in 2019. It was the first time I visited Poland. This is a part of history that cannot be forgotten. And I am now going to read your book. For those of you who are interested in finding out more, you can also go to sosamendesfoundation.org. The foundation has links to the educational activities, which include Joan's book, My Sister's Eyes. Christian Loff says, beautiful history, very strong, very touching. Alan Whiting says, thank you very much for sharing your family's story. What a wonderful tribute to them. Mariana really wants to see you next year in Portugal. Graham Broom-Levitt says, truly delightful, thank you. As Inês said, the personal is so much more powerful than the mere accounting of historical facts. Josefa is here with us and says, a great sharing, very important, never forget. Congratulations to both. The book is very special, and in the school groups of Carregal do Sal, it is a reference in the work we do in various areas. For those who don't know, the schools of Carregal do Sal are UNESCO schools, and they have a memory program. They have a Facebook page which you can consult, and they have a memory program in which they explore precisely not just Sousa Mendes actions and legacies and what moral courage really represents, but also looks at how this period was lived, was experienced by families such as the Krakowiaks. I do have one final question, which is, when did your family change its name and why did they choose Arnay?
I think they changed their name when they became naturalized citizen of the United States. But not only my father changed his name to Robert I, remembering Ignace Arnay. His brother was Henry Arnay, Paul Arnay, George Arnay. In Israel, George
so they all
Arnay.
Changed it.
Every one of them. And in South America, Arnay. He changed it to Arnay. And why did they choose Arnay? Because the brothers who were outside of Poland were in Belgium and France, and they loved the French language, and they were all in business. And they decided they needed a name with an A to be at the top of the book, you know, the yellow pages, which they used at that time. Yes. And they remembered the hills of Darnay in France, which is in Rouen, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they chose Arnay.
Wow, that's great. That's such a great explanation. And you know, I for a long time I mean, not for a long time, but there were 3 letters that were discontinued from the Portuguese alphabet sometime during the 20th century, which were K, W, and Y. I think K was never a part of the alphabet, but Y was, and it was discontinued. It's been now reintroduced, but when I grew up, the Y didn't exist. So it was always very exotic if somebody showed up with a W or a Y in their name, because it conveyed a certain idea of elegance and of cosmopolitanism if you had a Y in your name. And so I quite like to recognize these thoughts that go into, this name that we're going to give ourselves, a French sounding name that will put at ease our prospective customers. So I think that's it was definitely well played.
Thank you.
And I think, we do have 2 more comments, and it is Elena Baltazar saying this was a very touching meeting. Thank you so much. And Daphne Brouwer, who I think is in Jerusalem, saying thank you so much. So Daphne has gone well past your bedtime because I think it's past midnight now in Jerusalem.
Toda rabba, Daphne. Toda rabba. That means thank you very much.
And
I married an Israeli, by the way. I married an Israeli, by the way.
Yes.
I lived
So did you meet him
in Israel and had my first son. We had our first child in Israel.
So in Israel.
Yeah.
And yes, Daphne said, love listening to you. So we are winding down. Joan, of course, I want to thank you. And Daphne, of course, is inviting us all to go visit her in Jerusalem. Please don't say that twice because I certainly will. Joan, thank you so much. We have been talking for a long time by email. We've met. You've been at the Exiles Memorial Center. It's always wonderful to talk to you. It's always very special. And I'm very, very happy that we got to do this and be able to share your story with about
Inês,
and,
Inês, it's my honor. It's my honor and it's my duty. It's my honor and it's my duty to share. And that's what I do. And thank you. And you're fabulous, by the way. You're fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next month, we're going to be meeting for a way overdue meeting with Irene Pimentel, who will be talking about her book published last year, Holocausto. We are going to be discussing the way that the Holocaust is discussed today in Portugal, especially. This will be on the 22nd of April. For those of us who have not yet joined our mailing list, please do so. This is the best way of getting in touch with us and finding out what our activities are. And we hope to meet you soon. Oh my God, there's more comments coming in. Dor do Carm, thank you. Thank you to Inês and Joan. Okay, it's mostly thank yous and congratulations, which are always nice to receive. Joan, I'll speak to you soon. Everybody else have a good night. Joan, have a good dinner, and we'll speak soon. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.